Aloha. Welcome to Hawaiian IANDS. I'm your host, Sean Lether. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe to our Hawaiian IANDS YouTube channel. In January 2003, Vincent Todd Tolman was found dead in the bathroom of a small restaurant. He'd been dead for over a half hour. When paramedics arrived, they put him in a body bag and took him away. A rookie paramedic listened to an inner voice telling him, "This one's not dead." He was guided to risk his career, break all protocols, and resuscitate Vincent. Miraculously, he restarted Vincent's heart. Vincent survived, and was in a coma for 3 days. So I want to welcome our very special guest, Vincent Todd Tolman, author of Life After Death, who will share his journey to heaven and back and what it's like to be dead for 45 minutes. Welcome, Vinney. So glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. If there's anything I can do, I can show you what death is like for 45 minutes. Just kidding.
Well, we are grateful and honored that you're here. So please go ahead and share with us your what your life was like before, and the experience and how it changed you and what you've learned from it.
I had a very different life before this. I had actually lived overseas for a bit, had been to Russia and Europe and everything as a kid, just as a younger guy. And after all that, I decided I was going to tackle construction, and I worked construction primarily. And in a weird way, you know, at the time I was working in an area that when you have bad weather, you can't build. So I started figuring out I could work in the movie industry on the side of my construction. And I ended up doing that full time for about 3 years on a major television show and as a producer. And it was a fun life, but it was also a life away from my original existence close to God. I felt I had a close relationship with God most of my life, but around my 20s, I started to fall away from that relationship. And right when I started to clear that up and to clean that up and clean my life up, then I had my experience. And at the time I was amateur bodybuilding. So that's kind of where we start with my experience. Is the product that actually ended my breathing and my heart rate and my life was a supplement that was legal at the time, not legal now. A product that's called Furanone Dihydro. It was a weightlifting supplement. And we ordered some from Thailand, me and a best friend. And when I took it, me and my buddy, we knew instantly something was wrong with this batch. We knew it was far stronger than what was advertised on the bottle. And we knew that we were in trouble. So we, you know, being the invincible 25-year-olds that both of us were, we decided the answer was just to go eat some food, and somehow that would make us better. So we went down to a Dairy Queen that was only a few blocks away from his house. And we got there, we pulled in, I went into the bathroom, and the last thing I remember was the room spinning on me. And I do remember falling and feeling like a hard hit, whether it was I hit my head on something or I hit my head on the ground. Either way, I felt a very strong blow to my head as I hit the ground. And the very next thing I know, I feel as if I'm weightless, almost as if I'm electrical. I become like electricity of some sort, or energy. And as I'm feeling this weightlessness, the first thing I notice is that there's no pain. There's no feeling that I was used to feeling that was part of my life. Because I pushed my body quite a bit back then, and to not feel that pain at all anymore was exhilarating. It was beautiful. And in front of me, I started to notice this scene. It was kind of blurry. It was very blurry in the beginning. And as I put my intention towards the scene to see what was going on in front of me, my intention kind of cleared up the scene, and it allowed me to see what was going on. And I felt like I was watching a movie. I was watching this scene of a movie. It was being filmed from the ceiling looking down. And this is a weird thought, but the first thought that I consciously think I thought I had was, why would the director of photography shoot this film from the ceiling looking down? That's the first thought I had. And, you know, working in the industry, they call them DPs. I was like, why would the DP shoot this from this point of view? That's a weird movie. But I was intrigued. My cinematic bone was tickled, and I wanted to watch. I wanted to see what was happening. So I put my focus towards this scene, and I could recognize I was looking down from up above, and I could see this body on the ground. It definitely looked dead. The neck of this body was swollen wider than the jaw. The skin had turned purple. It was like a bright purple, and it had yellow blotches in the field of the cheeks. It looked almost fake, like a fake dead body to me. It didn't look real. I didn't think for a second that what I was seeing was me, because me was up here, and I was up here experiencing things. I did watch, I could see adjacent to what I was viewing, I could see my buddy who had taken the same supplement. He had gone in the restaurant and he had collapsed on one of their dining booths, and he started to vomit, and someone saw it. So they called 911, they got an ambulance there, and I watched them haul him away. And I remember feeling like this angst or this worry, like I hope that he's okay. And then instantly I knew he was going to be fine. Somehow I knew he was going to be okay. And then my attention came back to this body in the bathroom that nobody knew about, because the bathroom was locked. It was one of these single-use bathrooms. And there was a phone in there that kept ringing again and again and again, and no one was answering it. A customer kept trying to open that bathroom, and after about the fourth attempt, he went and got the manager and said, "Hey, I think there's somebody locked in there that needs some help. Can you open that door?" And they opened the door, and they see this body there. They called 911 for the second time that morning. And this young manager, he was about 20 or 21. His assistant manager was like 17, and she was a girl. And he was kind of coaching her while he was on the phone with 911. He was coaching her on what to do. You know, he's giving her the directions of the 911 operator. And they told her to, feel around for a pulse. And as soon as she touched the body, she like cringed back, and she's like, "It's cold. It feels cold." And, from the time that they found my body, and the time that they had driven away my best friend, it was over 40 minutes just right there. It was another 5 minutes before a medical team got there to pronounce the body dead. They did pronounce it. They tried to do some chest compressions. They put this thing on the mouth to try to give the body oxygen. Didn't work. They did pronounce it dead. And in this particular agency, they did carry body bags on their ambulances. Not all ambulances do. This one they did. They had some bright yellow ones. When they pulled this baby out, unrolled it, and put that body in, zipped it up. And this particular team was a medical team with 3 men on it. There was 2 veterans. They were the senior medics, and then there was a rookie. And in a weird way, I knew that this was his first week, in orientation or off orientation. But it was kind of like his first live week as a medic. And he's sitting in this back seat of that ambulance as they pull away. But as they pulled away, he felt this just unnerving thing happen to him. And from my perspective, this is what it looked like. He started to glow. He literally started to glow around his heart space. And I felt this tremendous energy go over me and went to him down there where I was watching. And I heard loud as day, "This one's not dead." I watched him kind of freeze and go rigid for a moment, but then he kind of went back and relaxed, and He rationaled that it was probably his imagination. And then I saw that glowing light that was coming from about the heart space of him get bigger and brighter to a point where he was glowing from the waist till above his head. And I mean, everything within that vicinity was glowing really bright light. And then I felt a second blast of energy go past me. And I heard even louder this second time, "This one's not dead." And when he heard it the second time, that was enough for him. He decided he needed to take action. He needed to do something. So he went ahead and broke protocol, which he had just learned all these protocols. He knew he wasn't supposed to do this. But he knew that he wouldn't rest if he didn't try this. So he opened up the body bag. He felt around for a pulse, and of course he didn't feel one. He felt around under around the neck. He went under the arm, still nothing. He felt almost a hardness to the body at this point. But he knew his training said that if there was even the most remote pulse, there might be one down at the femoral artery, or the artery near the femur. And so he felt down there he had to undo a couple of straps on the body, unzip the body bag even further, and he felt down around the thigh. And as he was feeling there, he made physical contact with my thigh bone, with my femur. And when he made that contact, there was some type of spark. And it was a spark that I felt up here where I was watching everything. And it was a spark he felt because he jumped. He jumped the same time that I felt the spark. And to him, that was enough sign. That was enough for him to try to resuscitate. So he went ahead, he hooked up a defib machine and charged the body once without any result. Meanwhile, his veteran medic started chastising him, telling him that he was going to be fired. He was breaking protocol and first week on the job, first week official, and now he's going to be fired. But he acted as if he couldn't hear him. He kept going. He went ahead with a second round of shocks, a second shock. And with that second shock, he did get a single heartbeat. And then he went to a third round. And on the third round of shocks, or the third shock, he got a steady but a faint heartbeat, but it was steady. And as life or the universe, or as I would put it, as God organized all this, that heart started about 100 feet away from a hospital. They weren't headed to that hospital. They were headed past it towards the medical examiner. But it just so happens that heart started literally 100 feet before the hospital. And so, miraculous as it is to me, they had that heart started, and within seconds, they had a trauma team there ready to meet this body and start trying to bring all the systems back, which was going to be quite an ordeal. And as I'm watching all this, I see them transferring the body over to the hospital gurney. I see the body going through all sorts of seizures and fits, and it's vomiting more stuff out of the mouth, foam and other things. And as I'm witnessing all this, I feel just tremendous sorrow for whoever this is. I still don't have no idea that it was me. Sometimes I'm the last one to the party. I'll just say that. Okay. And as that's all happening, as the body's going into seizures, they start strapping it down so that they can work on it. First, they strap the legs, then they strap the arms. But as they went to strap the left arm, I remember feeling someone strapping my left arm. And when that happened, I resisted. I felt someone where I was up here strapping my left arm, and I resisted. And as I resisted, I watched the strap on the body break. I watched it rip. And right then and there, I had this huge, reckoning that I was an idiot, that I'd been watching my own body's death this whole time. And I was thinking about movies. I was thinking about why they're shooting this film from up above. I had no idea that everything I'd been watching was me. And I just felt so dumb. I felt so dumb. And I remember thinking, like, you're such an idiot. Why did you not know this was you? And as soon as I started feeling that, I started to have this darkness like close in on me. And then I started seeing all the bad things I ever did in my life. I got to see them really fast, but also really drawn out. I got to see them very distinctly and clearly, not just from the perspective of me doing something to someone. I actually saw it from the perspective of the person receiving my harm, whatever that harm was, whether it was words or actions or whatever. So I saw it from both sides. And when I got done with that, I had the thought, why do I even exist? If all I am is this culmination of bad things that I've done, why do I even exist? And as this fear and this sadness started to overtake me, I then started to feel warmth. And this warmth, it was peace, it was love, it was unconditional love. And it started on my back. And it warmed me from my back over my shoulders, or what I would perceive as shoulders. And it warmed up my neck and into my head. And I could just feel the unconditional power of this love, how strong it was. I could feel that it was being given to me, not because I deserved it, but because I was existing. And now with this oncoming of this love, I started to see all the good I ever did. And I got to see so much more good that I did than bad, obviously. Well, hopefully. But I did. I got to see so much more good that I did. And just like with the previous experience, I got to see it from the perspective of people I did good for. And I got to see how sometimes I would do something and it would impact this person and that person impact that person. I got to see multiple generations of positive influence that I had. And it was at that point I realized that I was worth existing, that I had this light, that I had this love within me that was worth preserving. And that's when I also had this reckoning that all of this energy was coming from behind me. And I needed to turn around quick to see what was behind me. So I turned away from focusing on this body that was trying to be revived. And I turned behind me. And that's where I see this gentleman all dressed in white. He's got long white hair, long white beard. And the first thought I had is, oh, this is God. And he smiled at me, and without using any words, he communicated directly to me. He said, "No, son, I'm not God." And the next thought, I was trying to figure this out. I was racking my brain. I was raised Christian. And so I thought, well, if you're not God, is there some way that you're Jesus? That was the next thing that I could think of. And he just again smiled and shook his head and sent this message without using words. He said, "No, son, I'm not Jesus. I'm here to be your guide. I love you, and I want to take you wherever you want to go." And I felt so much love coming from this man. There isn't love here like that. And, who I was when this all happened, I was a broken man, broken boy. Had a lot of abuse in my life. Just check every box. And I had a lot of unspent anger when this all happened. And that was gone like that, like all of it. Every damage, every bit of abuse that I ever received was gone in a half of a second of feeling this love. And I could feel this divine purpose behind this love that he was showing me. And I felt how important and strong that energy was. And when he said he could take me anywhere that I wanted to go, I told him, I want to go where this love's coming from. And he explained, he's like, this is your home. This comes from your home. That's where you came from. And so I said, let's go home. I want to go home. So we began this journey. He did introduce himself. He called himself Drake. He said his friends called him Drake, so I could call him Drake. And I thought that was kind of an odd name, but that was before, back 2003. You know, Drake the musician was not such a big deal back then. So it was a kind of a new name for me. I had not known anyone named Drake. And so I started to follow along with him. First thing I did, though, is I said, you don't have to help me, Drake. I'm Christian. I'm saved. I've done all the hard stuff. You can just let me get into heaven. You can just let me go there. And he smiled and he explained to me that he loved that I believed I was ready to go in, but he was going to help me really get ready to go in. And really getting ready was going to take a little bit of work. I was going to have to take what I thought I knew and add a little bit to it, change it a little bit, tweak it with a little bit of love. And then he was going to help take me a step further and understand the other things I have yet to learn so that I could get into our home. So we began this journey. I felt that we were moving distances. I felt we were moving frequencies and dimensions as we were moving, but we were moving fast. And the first thing he helped me understand is that I had to learn authenticity. And I thought, well, no, it should be love, right? Love's supposed to be the first thing. He's like, no, authenticity first. And he explained to me that if we can't be authentic, we can't send or receive real love. And so that we have to figure out how to be authentic and figure out how to be the same person, no matter who we're with, who we're talking to. And that once we can find who that is inside of us, then we can be truly authentic. And at understanding that, he brought it to the next thing that he was teaching me, which is to understand the purpose of why we're all here. He showed me that before we all came here, we were existing in this beautiful space called home or heaven. And that every time the creator wanted something or the creator energy wanted something, we all just synchronized with that want and desire and made it happen. We became what that was. And it got to a point where we all felt that every decision was not our own. It was our creator's decision. And that we wanted to know what it was like to have our own decisions and have our own choices, our own abilities to make choices. And that's when the expansion was planned. And so we chose to come down here and pick up an avatar, pick up a look for a few years and play around in our bodysuits in these flesh vehicles and learn how to make choices. And that all along, our purpose for coming here was to learn. That's it. Not to be judged, not to be saved or thrown away, but to learn. To learn, to grow, to gain the ability to build relationships and create things. And that's the real purpose that we're here. And that's when he explained the third thing that I needed to learn is that we're here to love. We're here to love what we're doing. We're here to love passionately the things that are around us. And that as we can learn how to do that, we are embodying the lesson that we're here to do. But loving everyone is a vital part of that existence. And he went through and he taught me a lot more principles as we went on our journey. But we got to the actual heaven space And to me, it looked as if it was a tremendous planet, a planet that's far bigger than our sun, far bigger than anything we know in existence. And as we got closer and closer and touched down in this space, my feet made contact with the grass. And I had feet. That's, I was existing in an energetic body, which the energetic body is part of the eternal body. And it's far different than the physical body we have here, even though at that moment, my energetic body was still taking the form of the human body. My feet touched down on this grass. And it was the first feeling that I knew I was home. I didn't know it, but I had missed this grass. I'd missed the energy of what this represented for me. The shades of color in this grass are more than we can count, more than millions and billions of shades. And each blade of grass had a consciousness in it. Every single blade had a consciousness. And the grass itself even like broadcast a love energy. You could see it, it rippled in the air. You could see that there was this tremendous love coming off of the grass. And not just love, you could taste it. There was a sweetness about it. And an aroma, a very like sweet and beautiful aroma coming off of it. And beyond that, there was music coming from it. You could actually hear, it felt like concerto number heaven. It just felt like this tremendous, it did sound like string instruments, but you could feel this just vibration coming off of it. And as I touched it, I could feel the consciousness in the grass ask me if I wanted to know it. And I said, yes, I do want to know you. And as I wanted to know it, it brought my consciousness into the grass for me to know that that's where the creator is. Inside the grass, inside everything in heaven, there is source, there's creator there. And the grass itself had light coming from it. In that space, light's not some outside sun or star. Light is source. It's coming from each individual item in that space. And as I was just flabbergasted by this grass, Drake kind of sidled up to me and he says, if you think the grass is good, you should check out the flowers. And I about lost it. I was like, there's flowers? What? And so my consciousness, like, Drake helped me. He allowed my consciousness to play like a puppy, because my consciousness instantly got to be, boom, right on the petal of a flower. And it felt as if I was almost the size of like a ladybug or something. I was down experiencing the real up close and tangible aspect of the flowers there. And same thing, so many colors, so much vibration and smell and taste and even a different tone of music coming from the flowers than from the grass. And together now I was hearing the grass and the flowers. And I was building in my consciousness or my ability to receive this beautiful concert of love music. And as I'm just really trying to experience the flower, I'm talking to the flower. Then Drake asks me, he says, well, there's also trees. And I was just flabbergasted. There's trees. And right then, it felt as if my consciousness went into the ground and went to the root of a tree, and then was able to experience the tree itself and recognize that the tree itself was one being, but it was also one hive of beings, many consciousnesses there in the trees. And that again, it was source. It was our creator there. And I could feel just this tremendous love from all of these things. And now I was hearing this tone coming from the trees, on top of the flowers, on top of the grass. And that's when Drake pulled my consciousness back and said, "Would you like to experience water?" And of course, I was just gung-ho about everything there. I said, "Yes, I want to experience water." And so he put me down next to the water where I was touching the grass next to the water. And the water came up and started touching my toes, and the water actually asked me, "Would you like us to come upon you?" And I said, "Yes." And that's when the water came from my toes and started covering my whole body. And as it got to the crown of my head, it completed its connection with me. And then I was completely encompassed with this water. And I recognized what it was doing, that even though I got into heaven, I still had some little cracks, some little emotional traumas still stuck on me from earth life, from earth school. And that water just went in and filled in every little crack. And I felt just pristinely loved. I felt a divine love that if we could just experience that love for 2 seconds, we would change our lives, we would change the world. We would understand that that is the building block of the universe, is that love. Then as I'm freaking out about the water, it starts to recede off of me and go back down into the little stream that was next to me. I noticed a building. And with my construction background, I started to kind of freak out and geek out about this building. I could tell it was at least 4 stories tall. It was huge. And it was built out of a single slab of marble, the entire building. And that the marble itself was alive. And the way that we look at marble and we see like the tans and the golds and the coppers in white marble, those flowing energies were in this marble as well, but they were moving. It was almost as if the marble was built out of this flowing, glistening gold cream. And I wanted to know more about this building. I wasn't allowed to know much. I was told in the right time I would learn more. But I was shown that each room on this building, that if you wanted to get into one of the rooms, you had to match the love energy of what was going on in that room. And if you could, an opening would just form in the wall. You would walk in and then it would just seal itself without a door, just no doors. There was windows, which is kind of funny, but the windows were built out of that same marble. It was just thinner marble. And I noticed that there's just still this pristine love everywhere in this space, everywhere I turned. And as I was just trying to take all this in, I then felt Drake come up really close to me. And he put his arm around me and he said, "Vinney, this is going to be really hard, but it's going to be worth it." And he was looking at me in the eyes when he did that. And when he did that, he hugged me. He brought me in for this hug. And to me, I got to experience what it's like to be hugged by God. I could feel the vast power that was in this unconditional love for me, love I could never deserve. I could feel how much passion there was for the best outcome for me. And as I'm just really celebrating and experiencing this bliss of this hug from Drake, I started to hear my brother, my earth brother here on earth. He started giving my body a special prayer, a special blessing. And he was down on earth in the hospital. I'd been brain dead for 3 days at this point. The doctors were trying to tell my brother and my dad to shop for some type of hospice or some type of facility that could care for a vegetable, someone who's brain dead. And that really hit home to my brother. So he put his hands on me, he started a prayer, and he just pulled down the powers of heaven in that prayer. He was really worried about my mom. My mom didn't know any of this yet. My dad, my sisters, and my brother knew, but my mom didn't know yet. Everyone was waiting to see if I was going to live. Most everybody was telling my family that I would die, that it was a miracle I lived 3 days. And I could feel the love of my brother. I could feel the love he had for my mom, and feel that he didn't want to be the one bringing this devastating news to her, that her son had died. And he used that love in a manipulating way and forced me back. In a loving, manipulating way. He commanded my body to be made whole. He commanded me to come back to my body. And that began the hardest part of my life. I woke up at 1:11 in the morning on January 21st. I was pronounced dead on January 18th. And it was really hard for a while. And not only did I have this experience, I now had these voices that would talk to me. And in the mental field, the mental health field, voices are never good. And I could hear the professionals telling me how I shouldn't be hearing voices, and I shouldn't trust the delusion of my brain, my oxygen-starved brain. And I was starting to lose hope and starting to believe in the professionals who told me that I was mentally ill. I actually went to a doctor, and he was writing me 3 prescriptions. And in writing those 3 prescriptions for me, I had his grandmother there. She was in spirit, and I was talking to her. And she told me, "Don't you dare take these prescriptions unless you tell him this message I have for him." And I didn't want to deliver it. I already felt crazy. I felt like I didn't want to go in a mental facility, but at the same time, there was a part of me that said, maybe you should be in a mental facility. And I said, well, you know what? He's already going to write these prescriptions. I'll tell him what she needs me to tell him. And I told him a very quick 90-second message from his grandmother. He ripped up my prescriptions and said, "Get the F out of my office right now." So I did what I was told. I knew what to do with authority figures. I did as I was told, and as I drove away from there, I got a phone call. And it was from him, that doctor. And he said, "Vinney, whatever you have, I can't explain it. Whatever happened to you, medicine doesn't explain it." But he said, "The thing you told me was something I didn't even remember." And he had no idea the whole reason he went into the mental health field was something he'd been psychologically blocking his whole life. That's not something that I could have found out from anyone, because no one alive, including himself, even remembered anything about this. And there was only 2 people in this world that knew what happened and how it ended, and how his grandmother helped save him from a really difficult time and a really difficult place. And that's when I knew there was something there. And I kept hearing Drake. He's still talking to me at this point, and he still talks to me now. And he was saying, "Vinney, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it." There was times I wanted to cuss at him, for telling me that all the time. And fast forward to April. And I got to meet what I still dub as, and always will dub as, my earth angel. I got to meet my wife. And when we first met, when we first saw each other, I saw heaven in her eyes. And she saw a weird guy standing at the door. But we were both mesmerized. We couldn't speak for a while. And after we kind of got over that awe, we started to talk, and we built a friendship that before we even had gone on one date, we knew for a fact we were supposed to marry each other, and we knew for a fact that we were supposed to be on this journey together. And that's when I started to find hope for the first time after my experience. And since then, you know, we have 21 amazing years, not easy, but amazing. And we've got 2 amazing kids. And at the beginning of that journey, before we even got married, 1 month before we got married, we were in a little tiny town of Wyoming. We were of Afton, Wyoming. We were at a family reunion, and we decided to participate in the local activities. In Afton, Wyoming, there's about 1 or 2 things to do at night, and that's it. And most of them you can't talk about. But with this event, they were having a little play at the high school. And it was a play about the history of the town. And a lot of my cousins and my family, they came from that town. So we decided to all go, a few of us. And Andrea and I, my fiance at the time, we went there and we were watching this play. And it was towards the end of July, but it was really cold because it is Afton, Wyoming. It's cold all the time there. And it was getting really cold as the sun went down. And they start talking about the history of the town. They're putting up big slides on the screen of this projector and showing these different founders of the town. And as I'm not paying attention like I normally do, because I'm always distracted, Andrea said, "That's your guide. That's Drake." And before I even looked, I responded with, "That's not him." Like, I was saying that's not him, and I caught myself. And I ate my words in the middle of that sentence because the picture of the person I was seeing on the screen was Drake. And I didn't know who he was. I still didn't know who he was yet. But what's weird, though, is I was confused. The picture said his name was Charles. But I recognized the last name. It was my grandmother's maiden name. So we went to my grandmother's house. And I asked her, I go, "Grandma, can you tell me about this Charles Kazare? I need to know about this guy. I recognize his face." And her exact response was, "Oh, you mean great grandpa Drake? He's kind of famous." And now I had a second confirmation I wasn't crazy. So officially, for me, I knew I wasn't crazy, that what I had experienced was a real thing. And come to find out, Drake, his name is Charles Drake Kazare. His family and his friends knew him as Drake, but everybody else in the world knew him as Charles. He was my great grandfather on my grandmother's side, a man I'd never heard his name, never saw his face, never heard anything about this guy until this experience. And to me, it was a sweet synchronicity of my experience. And it's as if God knew I needed that confirmation, because I do have a strong ego, and not a good ego. It's one of those bad egos that wants to convince you all the good things are bad and all the bad things are good. So it's, you know, I have one of those egos, and it was telling me that I was crazy and I didn't have this experience and I needed to not trust it. I needed to get on meds, and I needed to follow the traditional medical path, which would have led me into an insane asylum. But I didn't. I followed those confirmations. And after that second confirmation, that second synchronicity, I knew that this was a destined path for me and that I needed to share my experience. It took me a long time to share it with more than just one person at a time. I'd share it with one person at a time for years. Then I started sharing in bigger groups, family groups, get-togethers at homes, holidays. And then I started to share it in bigger groups. And every single time I shared it, someone would always come up afterwards and say, you need to make this a book and send one to me as soon as you're done. Because they all wanted to have this story, this experience that I had, because it helped make heaven more real for them. Because it's sure as hell real for me. It is. There's no question. Faith is not a thing anymore for me. It's just follow what I know, or don't follow what I know. But it becomes a knowledge for me now at this point. And I've learned to live in this middle ground where I can still live here on earth. And I do listen to my intuition extremely well. That's what I do for a living. I actually hope that I can make this difference with my experience, where I can help people activate their own intuition. And every day my job is to help people in their lives get rid of problems, get rid of any obstacle that they find, but not by giving them the answers, but helping teach them how to find their own answers. Diving into that God spark that every single one of us has, and activating it and connecting each one of us with our higher self, our higher existence, our soul. But that's my experience. And yeah, it taught me a lot.
Wow, thank you, Vinney. That's beautiful story. Beautiful story. And for those of you, feel free to put your questions in the chat for us to ask Vinney. I already have so many questions for you.
Well, we're waiting for some of those to come in. Ask me a question, Sean. I'm an open book. And, a lot of people, when they talk to me and stuff, they say, do you want us to send you the questions? You want this? And I'm like, nope. Because if I keep my intuition, I don't need any of that. And I love my intuition for all of that.
That's so beautiful. So, the first question that I got right off the bat was, you kept talking about the body. And of course, we know that you didn't realize it was your body at that time. But could you explain for people the difference of even if you did know it was your body, why you were calling it the body? And then also, if you could talk about the difference between the physical body and the energetic body.
Well, what's really neat is, if you break down our existence here, there's three aspects to who we are. There's the physical self, there's the soul or the subconscious, and then in between the physical self and the subconscious is the conscious or the mind. And there's three very distinct aspects of who we are inside each one of those. And what happened is, when I died, my body died and I was watching it, I do call it the body because that's all it is. It's kind of like when you pull up to a grocery store and you step out of your car, you're not that car. You're the person driving the car. Our soul is who we are. And I'm not Vinney. Vinney is the current avatar or the current face that I'm existing in. But who I really am is actually very different than Vinney. And thank goodness. Oof, just kidding. Did that answer it? Did that answer it for you?
Yeah. I think. Okay, so can you repeat for everybody the three things that Drake shared with you before you entered heaven?
Sure. Actually, there's 10 things that he taught me, and I'll share all 10 with you real quick, because I'll go real quick with it, okay? The first thing is authenticity, that's paramount for all of us here. That if we can't be authentic, we can't grow, we can't learn, we can't love or receive love until we're authentic. And if we go through many relationships in our life, and we never seem to find that happiness. It's because of that. We're not allowing ourselves to be authentic. And anytime we feel vulnerable, that's a good thing. That's an opportunity to build a strength where there's a weakness. And if you can feel vulnerable, you're being authentic. If you can't feel vulnerable, then you're not being authentic. But authenticity is number one. Know the purpose of life is number two. Number two being know the purpose of life is just to understand that Earth is a school, not a courtroom, always a classroom. Here to learn and grow, and take what we learn and grow with us to move on. Third is love everyone. And I mean everyone. The good, the bad, the short, the ugly, the tall, and the strong. Everybody. We've got to learn how to find a way to love all beings. And when I say beings, I include with that animals, plants. We need to learn how to love our existence here. It's really important for us. And the love that we allow ourselves becomes an amplifier for our existence. And then the fourth thing that I was taught is to learn how to listen to your inner voice. That all of us have the God spark. Whether we admit it or not doesn't matter. It's still there. Some of us who may believe we don't have it, it could be that it's turned off because of trauma. It could be that it's turned off because of ego or logic, or the inability to trust something unseen. But the God spark is there, and there's ways to activate it and turn it on. And that's important that everybody is able to do that, because there's a point where in the future, hypothetically, technology doesn't work. All we have is that intuition. All we have is that communication network to work through, the spiritual network. All right, number 5 is learn to use technology responsibly. And this is where I learned the power of a principle called the hour of power. And that's the first 30 minutes when you wake up and the last 30 minutes before you go to bed. If you look at what you're filling that time with, you are recognizing what you're worshiping. Because what you put in that first 30 minutes and that last 30 minutes of your day, it frames who you are and what you're doing here. So if you're putting whatever in there, that is framing your existence. So if you're miserable, look at your hour of power, clean it up, put some good stuff in there, and watch your life start changing. It's a simple change, but it makes a big difference. Then the 6th principle is to release all prejudice. And I thought I was not prejudiced at all. I felt like I had no prejudice. I had 2 Korean sisters adopted. I felt closer to them than I did my birth brother and my birth sister. So I felt there was no room for prejudice in my life. And that was when Drake asked me, he said, well, I'm glad that you're not prejudiced, but how do you feel about prejudiced people? And I went off. I was like, oh, I'll tell you about prejudiced people. And he showed me. He picked my consciousness up and showed me that I was joining the prejudiced team by being prejudiced towards prejudiced people. That I needed to have a love for all people, including prejudiced people. And he showed me someone I knew who was prejudiced, not anymore. But he showed me the path that they had taken and the path that had been given to them that caused them to have some sort of prejudice. And he showed me that the only answer to prejudice is not anti-prejudice. It is pro-love. We will never eradicate prejudice on this planet by being anti-prejudice. We have to be pro-love. We have to be pro-unity. We have to be pro the solution to prejudice. And that way we can eradicate it. And then he helped me understand that all of us have a power of creation. And that's principle number 7. The power of creation is our thoughts, that we create with our thoughts. If we want to think lots of bad things, eventually bad things will happen. If we want to think lots of positive things, eventually positive things will start happening. So make sure you're choosing what you're broadcasting. And our thoughts, that's where it all begins. And I know a lot of us have negative thought programming from our parents, but we don't have to keep that. We can change that. We can choose not to indulge that. And then the eighth principle is avoid the influence of negative energy. So avoid negative influences. So if your thoughts are powerful and they help create what's going on in your life, it's vitally important you're avoiding negative influences. So if there is an influence that's negative that you can choose not to have in your life, eradicate it. Or put some type of protection, even mentally in your imagination. Put a wall of light between you and it. And don't let it get through that wall of light. Don't let it affect you. So avoid negative influences. Then the ninth principle is that there is purpose of evil. For there to be a good, there has to be an evil. For there to be a left, there has to be a right. That to get rid of all evil would to remove the purpose of life. We're here to learn how to make choices, and that means good choices and bad choices. But if you remove all the bad choices, now we're not learning anything. So there is purpose, but there's also special protection that God puts on us. So when evil people are doing bad things, we have that protection around our soul while that's happening. And that when we get on the other side, we don't carry that whole trauma of what happened. We carry an aspect or a memory of it, but nothing like we would think. And so we do have a special protection with God's love around us for that. And then the last one, and I think one of my favorites, is that we're all one. And, the same way that I have multiple fingers on my hand, even though one's kind of crooked, bent wrong, we have multiple fingers on our hand. If I hate or hurt this finger and I'm this finger, I'm only hating or hurting myself. And that we are all one in unity as being creation from our God, from our Creator. And if we are all part of that creation energy, that God or source energy, when we hurt and we harm each other, we're actually hurting and harming ourselves in the long run. And that goes back to that loving everyone. If we love everyone, we're not going to seek to harm or hurt others at all. But that's the 10 principles. That was the 10 things he taught me before I got loaded with that spiritual grass.
Wow, that was amazing. That was so great. And we have a ton of questions. So I'm going to try to so you talked about the water. And the water, filled you in and you felt whole and perfect then. Many of us near-death experiencers were perfect. We see our perfect selves on that side. And then we come back into a body and we see these things that we still have to heal.
Yep.
Maybe you could talk about that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I wish that the healing that I received stuck on me all the way, because it did change me, but it changed me at the foundation. Like, it helped patch the foundation of who I am, but I still had some bad engineering, bad framing, bad structural stuff going on from dad and from the trauma and life. And with all that going on, I work on myself regularly still to this day. And I don't think that ever ends until I get to go back home. But it is a process.
So as long as we're in a body, we have healing to do.
Absolutely.
Even if we've had an NDE and seen our perfect selves.
Well, this is how you can tell that you did a great job and you're done healing. You're not here anymore. That's how you can tell.
Perfect. Perfectly said. Yes.
Yeah. So if you have some healing to do, good on you. You've got some life left in you.
So how did you, because you've had a lot of trauma, how have you healed your trauma?
Being a dad was one of the best things in the world for that, because I was able to give a love to my daughter, which she came first. She's now 14, sorry. Oh, she'd get mad at me if I said that. She's 14. Big difference between 12 and 14. She has helped me understand love. She's helped me love her in a way I never got, in a way that's unconditional. Like, I don't care what kind of grade she gets. And it's funny, she jokes around with her friends that she's got the only parents that don't care about her grades. She does good on her own. She's hard enough on herself. We don't need to do any of that. And authentically just really loving her. That's the best way I can start healing myself. Now, I have discovered a really life-changing modality called emotion code. I've also done QHHT. I've done deep hypnosis. I've done a lot of different modalities, and each one of them, including Reiki, which I'm a Reiki practitioner. I also do my own healing modality, which is kind of a combination of all of that, with some spirit voices in my head that kind of point us to the real problem. Even when we're looking over here, it's actually over here. And that helps a lot. Having that intuition is just so awesome, even for my own healing, because I'll be looking at one symptom or one thing I think it is, and right away spirit calls me out on it and says, it's not that, it's this over here. So we go deal with that over there, But yeah, it's an amazing thing to be on the healing journey. And I love learning any new way of connecting to that healing. And we're coming into a new phase on Earth where healers are activating all over the planet right now, all over. And these healers are attorneys and police officers and nurses and teachers and massage therapists. These healers are all over the world and doing different things right now. And they're activating right now and getting ready to get society ready, because we're getting ready for some really neat stuff coming up in our future. And that healing is going to be very real and not so much traditional medical like we've looked in the past. Very much more energy healing above everything else, essentially. But yeah, I like finding new modalities all the time. I love it.
Wonderful. So is there a difference between intuition and God consciousness? And if there is, how do you tell the difference?
So intuition is where you're plugged into the God consciousness, and you're going to perceive it as like your guide. Some people call it the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost. But that's where you're plugged in. But if you follow that cord up to the top, you find the creator, you find source, right? So you can tap in right where you're plugged in, or you could tap in up at the ancestor level, or you could tap in even higher to the collective or cooperative teams of light. And then as you get close to the creator, you find this higher self way up there. And that higher self's kind of pulling all the strings. And that one's really fun to connect to. That one's beautiful because that one has a supreme level of intellect, knowledge, and all-knowing. And it comes from a divine space of love, just tremendous love for you. And if you can tap into that, it's a lot harder to be depressed. But I'll be the first one to tell you, even though I can tap in, I don't always remember to do it. I got to remember to do it. So there's a process to it. I can't go watch a violent movie or a dark movie and then just plug in. It's nearly impossible. I have to go cleanse myself. I have to go clear myself. And then I have to pump myself up into the energy, the light energy, and then I can plug in. And so for me and my family, we typically don't watch that kind of stuff for that very reason. We just, there's ramifications after the fact for days and sometimes weeks. And with what I do every day, I can't do that. I can't help people if I'm not plugging in. Yeah.
That's great. Great advice for people to avoid some of that negative, awful stuff. That there's some good shows out there.
There is
full of violence.
But do you know what's weird? Do you know what's weird, Sean? When I need light, guess what shows I want to go watch? Not shows full of light. when I'm in the depths of life and I really am feeling down, you know what shows I want to go watch? Something violent. And not that I'm going to go choose a violent show, but like one of these shows that has it in it that's really,
Right.
great cinematics or high production value, whatever. But that energy lingers on us. And when you're someone like me, you feel that. And if I do too much of that, I'll get ill. I'll get physically
Yeah.
ill off of it. So I have to be careful about it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. So you talk about authenticity. That was that was number 2, right? Or was that?
Yeah, authenticity is number one. Number one.
Yeah, number 1. And do you know who Father Nathan Castle is, right? He helps stuck souls cross over. Yeah.
He's the one, he comes to IANDS, right?
Yeah.
He has the all white
yeah,
smock,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was our speaker last month. And what was really cool in what he was saying and what you're saying. So for him, the number one thing that made a lot of souls stuck is not being able to admit the truth.
Yeah, they don't want to face it. Yeah.
Right. And you're talking about authenticity, which is basically kind of the same thing, and facing who you are and what you've done, your actions. So a lot of people would like to know more about that for you. And
Absolutely.
what does authenticity look like? How do you know if you're being authentic?
So ask yourself, if I go and hang out with mom, am I speaking, acting, talking, and doing different things than I am without mom there? If I go with my best friend, am I speaking, acting, and doing differently than I would without my best friend there? And when you can say, no, I'm the same person everywhere I go, you're authentic. And until then, you're not authentic. And it's not a bad thing. It's just something you can work on. And what you can do is start saying, well, I'm going to take that piece of me that I am with my best friend, and the piece of me that I am with my mom, and the piece of me I am at work and with cowork, other friends, and I'm going to weave it to be one being. So I'm the same person everywhere I go, and I can be real with people. I can be authentically loving them, but at the same time, someone says something that's not right around me, I'll call a spade and be like, wow, that's not a loving way to say that. Like, there's a way to really be authentic, but still be loving. And so without being judgy, you can't be judgy, because if you're judgy, that means somehow you're higher than someone else. And you don't get to heaven that way.
I will never forget, after my NDE, the first time I was in a Course in Miracles group, and I was sitting there observing them judging each other, and then me judging them. And it's always been one of the most profound things after my NDE, because I realized, my NDE was the beginning. It was not the end. It was just the beginning of this journey.
And what I've
noticed, a long ways to go.
If I'm judging someone, it's not that I'm judging them bad. I'm seeing something in them that reminds me of me. So I'm mirror triggering. And that's what I call it with the work that I do. Is if someone's bothering you, it's because they're like you, or they represent an older version of you. And I've seen that quite a bit in my life, where somebody's really triggering me, and I have to sit with it and ask myself, what's triggering me about this person? And then if I dive deep enough, I can easily see, oh, I was this person when I was 12, or when I was 14, or 18, or 25. You get to the only stuff that's really getting you is stuff that reminds you of truth or yourself. That's it.
Right.
Truth or yourself. That's the only two things you trigger on. So if you're triggering, don't point all the fingers at someone else, because when you're pointing all those fingers, you're pointing one finger at that person, you're pointing 3 more fingers back at yourself. That means you have 3 times the work you need to do on yourself than what you're seeing other people's need to do. That you're saying they need to do this, they need to do that. Actually, you need to do that and that 3 times over. Yeah.
Yeah. A Course in Miracles, which is something that I like to study. It says something
I
similar.
love it. I love A Course
That
in
everything that
Miracles.
triggers us in somebody
Yeah.
else is an opportunity for healing in ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of like having a sliver in your hand, and then you go work with your hands and you're like, ow. And you get mad at the spade that you had in your hand. You're like, it's not the spade, that's you. You're the one with the sliver. So don't get mad at that. Go pull out the sliver, and then you can work with that spade all day long and not get sore at all. So, get you good, and everyone else all of a sudden starts getting in line, and you can get along with everybody.
Yes, totally. So, so speaking of your guardian, which was your great grandfather, or your
great triple great. So great grandfather. Yeah.
Does everybody have a guardian?
Yes, all of us do. All of us have a team of souls and angels that work on one side of us, and souls and angels that work on the other side of us. One side is the ancestral side. For most of us, that's going to be, one specific side, that's the ancestral. And when I say side, I mean like right and left. And then on the other side, you have your God side, the side that's assigned to you by God, by our Creator, by your own higher self, your higher collective, your team. They assign these souls and angels to work with you. And they're very real. Angels are real. Spirits and souls are very real. They are guides. They're constantly working with you. And I challenge you to do this, okay? Here's a perfect way to prove that they're there. Choose a friend in your life you haven't heard from for a while. Write their name on a piece of paper and put it in a place where you're going to see it every day. And every time you walk by that piece of paper, I want you to say their name and hold it in love. And if you do that with enough love, they'll call you the very first day you do it. If you do it with like hardly any love at all, by about the 5th day, they're going to call or reach out to you. Or God's going to put you guys walking right past each other. Either way. But that's how it works. Like, those guides are there. They're there to help facilitate this experience. And if we don't ask for their help, they can't help us. So start enrolling them in your experience. Start asking for that help. If you do, then you're going to get the help. And there's not one right way of asking. Just do it. Whatever way connects to you to ask, do it. If that's meditation, do it. If that's prayer, do it. If it's scripture study, Torah, Talmud, Quran, Bible, all of it. Do whatever you got to do to connect to that element and start asking. Knock on that door. It's going to open up.
But we always have to ask.
We do. We have to ask. I always joke around that most of us treat this life like Starbucks. We pull up, we order our food, we order our drinks. We pull up to the window and we pay, and then we drive away. And we complain, like, why the heck didn't we get our drinks and food? Why didn't they give us our drinks and food? I can't believe God's not giving us our drinks and food. And it's because as soon as we paid, we thought, oh, I asked, and then I moved on with my life. They don't wait. So when you are asking, wait, give yourself a moment to lovingly consider an answer. And sometimes an answer shows up. Sometimes that drink and that food gets put in your hand in an idea or a person or a place to go. So be very aware of that ask, number one, ask, and then wait a moment. Don't just pull away. Because if you just pull away and go about your life, yeah, go ahead and complain you're not getting what you're praying for. But it's because you're not giving space to receive it. So don't just ask, give space to receive it. That's an important aspect of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about expectations? What about, maybe you could talk about, maybe the answer isn't necessarily exactly what we expect
I live
it
this
to be.
way. I don't just preach this, I practice it. If I order something and the wrong thing gets delivered, guess what I'm eating? I'm eating the wrong thing. I will always do that, because that's the way I deal with God too. Is I will ask God for what I desire, but I will receive whatever shows up. I will. I'm always going to consider, using my intuition, is this the right answer for me? I know it's different than I expected, but is it the right answer? And most times I'm getting a yes. This is your next step. And so I'll embrace, accept that next step. But just because we want a life raft, don't turn down the helicopter and the tugboat and everything else that's not a life raft. Like, accept the help that shows up. It'll show up in one shape or another.
So you're saying that maybe sometimes what shows up is not what we wanted, but it was maybe what we actually needed.
It is
the most.
so much so. And lots of times God plants an idea or a direction on our heart, not so that we could actually get that idea or go that direction. It's so that we have the perception of getting that. And I always joke around, it's kind of like hopping on a ship pointed at London and you end up in Norway. And it was because you're always meant to be in Norway. But God knew if he points you at Norway, you'd end up in Greenland, So God wants you to think London, point towards London, and then you land in Norway. You were always meant to be where it ends up happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Accept it. Yeah. Learn to accept and embrace the flow of life. And as you become a good flower, you become a flower. Yeah.
And that might be why a lot of us, we're like, I'm praying, and I'm not getting the answer, because the answer's coming, but it's not what we're expecting.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we're asking for such a big thing that God has to baby gift us into the big thing. And so we've got to learn how to receive the baby gifts before we can get the big boy gifts or the big girl gifts. Yeah.
I call it following the breadcrumbs.
Yes, follow the breadcrumbs.
I've learned just follow the breadcrumbs. Yeah. So, oh wow, we have so many questions. What was there a message that your doctor's grandmother gave to you? Somebody wanted to know.
So, yes, it was a very private trauma that happened to him that he had not even remembered he had happen to him. And the message wasn't about that trauma. It was about, don't you ever forget, I saved you from this, and this, from this person. And I stopped it in its tracks and didn't ever allow it to happen again. So don't disregard that. And that's all it was. It had no message about me. It was just, don't forget this little nugget. And what's neat is that was something that was behind his wall of psychoses. He did not remember at all that in any way, shape, or form, but yet his whole life he had this burning desire to go into the mental health field. He didn't understand it. He felt it was like a life calling, and that's what it was. His grandmother had saved him from some active trauma going on, and she became his savior, and she needed to remind him, hey, this is why you're doing what you're doing. Don't screw up this kid. And so he didn't. He ripped those prescriptions up and said, deuces, get out of here.
That's awesome. I wasn't going to say anything about this, but it just reminds me, speaking of grandmothers, one of my best friends who, I have a lot of friends that are not in this world that we're in. And McCarthy, who lives in Washington, D.C., who many of you who were at the conference remember my friend McCarthy, who's always kind of made fun of my little groups and my little experiences. And everything that I've said about his grandmother, well, Vinney, McCarthy gave Vinney a ride to, was it Richmond?
Well, it was weird. I was checking out of the hotel. I knew I needed to get to Richmond, and I was calling an Uber when my spirit guide said, don't call an Uber, go over here and tell this guy. Like, what? And it didn't make sense. And whenever it doesn't make sense, I know I got to follow it. I got to follow it all the time, but especially when it doesn't make sense. So here I was checking out, and I see this McCarthy over there. I recognized him from a couple of nights before. And I was like, oh, hey, McCarthy, how's it going, man? I'm checking out here. I'm about to head to Richmond. He's like, what? I'm headed to Richmond. I was like, okay, that's great. That's cool. Could I pay you a little bit of gas money or something to take me there? And he's like, no, I'll just take you there. And so we got to have a good 2.5 hour trip. And he kept taking the wrong turn on purpose, I think, so that we could have more talking time. Um, or maybe his grandmother was kind of guiding things, which maybe I think that's more likely. But we got to release a lot of trauma in him in that 2 hour drive. And by the end, I didn't just part as someone I knew. It was a brother. It was a
Yeah.
true brother I had in McCarthy, and I even gave him my favorite crystal necklace.
Yes,
And he
yes,
still
he
wears
showed
it.
me.
He wears it all the time.
Yes.
So yeah, and in the end, I made him take some gas money too, because that was a long drive, and he was heading to Richmond too, but I wanted to cover him on that. But yeah, when you follow that intuition, it doesn't make sense. But God knew that he was going to the same city I was going to 2.5 hours away, and he told me to go tell him. I didn't understand that's what was going to happen, but that's what happened. And yeah, that's what's beautiful about it. Following that
Yeah.
intuition is so beautiful when you can do it, when you can have the courage to do it. It would have been so easy to just hit, call my Uber. I was already there. I put in the destination, and all I had to hit was one button when Spirit said, "Don't do this. Go talk around this guy about it."
Yeah.
I was like, okay, here we go. Let's see where the adventure goes. And sure enough, we had an amazing adventure.
Yeah, it's so amazing how spirit works because McCarthy and I have been friends forever. And like I said, he makes old jokes about my groups and what we do. And anything that I ever told him that his grandmother said, he always like would laugh me off and like, you're nuts. But the day with you,
Yep.
he now I mean it's amazing how it's changed him.
Well,
So
she was able to show me some things that kind of the same thing, some things that he'd never really talked to anyone about, and kind of brought up some things that were a little bit of a hardship on the family. And he just loved it. He really loved connecting to his grandmother. And this isn't what I do. I'm not a medium. I carry the mediumship as an ability, but it's not my thing. It's not what I do. And it doesn't work on everybody. It only works when the loved ones are showing up for that person. And right the second I sat in his car, I felt his grandmother like pretty much sitting in my lap the whole way down. And that was awesome. That was really awesome. I loved being able to deliver that message for him. It was life-changing for him and me. It gave
oh
me
totally.
extra confirmation of the
He is
power of
forever
spirit.
changed. I think he will be with us at the IANDS conference in Phoenix
Yeah, I think so too.
because of that
Yep.
experience. So yeah, that is just, one life that you have really touched. So were you active in the LDS church?
Yes. Yes. So I've well, I was active my whole life until I was about 20. And then from 20 to about 24, almost 25, that's when I was making movies and going to parties and drinking a lot and partying a lot. So I had my spell of wild life. And once I started to clean all that up and I got sober, then I had my experience. So yeah, it's part of who, and I know you grew up around that too, right? In Utah? Yeah,
Born, yeah, in Salt Lake City. Yeah.
there you go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have a tremendous love for the culture of every religion, every single religion, and the people that I work with, I help them be a better version of themselves. And so if they're a Muslim, I help them be a better Muslim. If they're a Buddhist, a better Buddhist. If they're a Mormon, I'll try to help them be a better Mormon. Like Catholics, better Catholics. I try to do all of that with the work that I do, and it helps. It just even plugging through the channels that they're comfortable plugging, we're able to really facilitate that for them.
Yeah, and so several people have asked, that's why I'm asking, are you still active?
Yes, so I do teach in church on a regular basis. Um, I have a lot of lessons that I kind of take a very open direction on, where I help people look at the core, the principle, and not necessarily the culture. I try to help in the work that I do there, because I do have that job. I work every Sunday at church, or not every Sunday, a couple Sundays a month, we'll call it that.
Yeah.
And with that job, I try to help focus on the core, the truths, and not the culture, because sometimes the culture can fall far away from the truth, and
Right.
that's with any religion. So I really put a focus on that, and I love it. I love working with everybody that I work with. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. As somebody who grew up in Salt Lake City, who has then lived in California and Hawaii, and there's a lot of LDS people here in Hawaii. There's a huge difference in the culture, like you're saying.
It is. There is.
Yeah.
And the culture is one thing in the state of Utah. It's a whole nother culture outside the state of Utah. I'd say a more authentic culture outside the state of Utah. But I do love it. I love the people, the place, and the structure that it is for people. It's not for everybody, but it does work for those who use it as a structure to connect to God.
So have you studied the similarities between Swedenborg and the LDS Church? Have you looked at that at all?
I actually haven't. I've never studied that. I've actually studied extensively 2.5 years of Buddhism. I've studied Catholicism. I've studied a little bit of Hare Krishna and Taoism. And part of my study work of doing that is so that I'm well prepared to work with someone who is in that faith. And I don't want to be teaching something that conflicts with their faith. I want to work within that paradigm and help them be a better version, a more connected, plugged into God version of that faith person, right? And so in doing that, it's allowed me to learn a lot about these different religions. But Swedenism, I've never heard of that
Swedenborg.
before.
He had a near-death experience in the 1600s.
Wow.
It's pretty. It'll be interesting. Check it out, and we'll talk about it later.
That would be a
cool.
rabbit hole. That'll be a rabbit hole I pop my head out of, and I'll talk to you about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I want to find out more.
Yeah, I had no idea, actually. I didn't know about him until after my NDE, and I'll just share, because so many people are asking about the LDS Church. What was interesting for me is so much of in my NDE was not foreign to me, and it was based, a lot of it was what I had been raised to believe. And I have later found out that Swedenborg played a big influence on Joseph Smith. And so there's just a lot of very cool similarities. Yeah. So
I was just going to say, I do work with people that are atheist and agnostic. And it's pretty amazing, though, without putting any intention to try to nudge them towards God, just calling it the universe with them, because that's the terminology used with them, is we're able to help really activate some light inside of them, even with their belief system of atheism or agnostic belief systems. You can still become like a better, more authentic, more connected to the universe than other atheists and agnostics.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say you're more spiritual than religious now? Or has it made you more religious? What would you say?
So I'm going to say this. My connection to God exists with or without religion. That's going to stay there no matter what. Nobody holds a key to my faith or to my connection. Only I do that. And so to me, my religion is something that helps me strengthen that through culture or through habits, through a church that's going to meet every Sunday. And it gives me a job, so I've got to be there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be there every Sunday without a job, So it's like, it helps me be a better version of me. So I feel it works. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. And I'm not one of those people that says my beliefs are everyone's beliefs. I am firm that if we were all supposed to be one religion, we'd go to Baskin Robbins and we'd only see chocolate. That's it. But you go to Baskin Robbins and you see a lot of different flavors because that's what we need. There's a flavor for everybody. There's a connection to God for everybody. Even if that connection to God is a disbelief in God, there's even a connection that can be had there. Yeah.
Well said. So is there any final thoughts that you would like to share with everyone before we wrap up?
Well, I like to deliver this final thing at everything that I do is understand this. And this is a knowledge. This is not a faith thing for me. This is a knowledge. I know for a fact that there's a creator. I know that for a fact there's a piece of that creator in every single one of us here tonight. I also know for a fact that the creator looks at us as a divine masterwork, that the rest of the universe, in fact, looks at us as blessed and lucky, and they want to know what's going on this earth school. It's very important what's going on here. And we essentially are the divine masterwork. We are the cream of the crop of existence. We don't act like it, but we are. And if you could go away with one thing, it would, that if I could do what I feel pulled to do, it would be to help you understand that you're loved exactly how you are, not for who you think you need to be or who you need to be rinsed off or cleansed to be, but who you are right now. You're extremely precious to the creator, to source, and vitally important to the happiness of the universe. And that if you could see how important you are to God, you would never believe any of the things you tell yourself. So stop telling yourself those things. Stop sending negative broadcasts and start sending the positive broadcasts with your thoughts. And it will change things. But you're a divine masterwork. Don't ever forget it.
Oh, thank you. That is so perfectly said. And I do want to mention, I am so glad that you and Andrea met, because I've gotten to know Andrea, and she's a beautiful human and spirit. And I just want to thank you both. And it's just been an honor for you to come and join us and share your wisdom. And I hope you will come back soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And you know what? If I didn't find her, I'd probably be back there by now. I was already looking into being an underwater welder or a crab fisherman, because those were the two highest fatality jobs back then. And as soon as I met her, I canceled those plans. So yeah, she's really amplified that light for me. So thank you. Thanks for having me, Sean.
That's wonderful. I'm just honored, and we're all honored, and we will see you both at the IANDS conference.
Yes.
Vinney will be a featured speaker in Labor Day weekend at the IANDS conference in Phoenix.
Yeah,
so it'll be awesome to see you guys there. So thank you, everyone. Aloha. Have a wonderful night. And thanks again, Vinney, for sharing all your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Sean. Sending everybody with love and light tonight. Thanks, guys. Love you.